Tell me what's your name, where you're from, and how you got to be a coach here at Seton Hall.
So my name is Simone Asque. I am from Chicago, Illinois originally. Ended up playing in college and everything, played overseas a little bit as well. So once I finished playing my playing career, got into coaching back home in Chicago with my start, and then came out to, started at New Jersey, then down in South Carolina for a year, and then back now here at Seton Hall as the first assistant.
Cool. And then for recruiting purposes, a lot of girls are starting out and they have no idea where to go. They don't know what to do.
Yep.
So pre-recruitment, when you're scouting for a player, what are you looking for?
When I scout for a player, I really look at kind of what their body mechanics look like, because everybody has a progression of their skill and, getting stronger and everything else. But really a lot of the fundamentals and how they approach the game with their basic skill is really, solid and important as they progress.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have someone who maybe isn't quite strong enough yet at like a middle blocker position, but they have really good general footwork, they have really good, ready posture. That goes a long way, because then once they're stronger, they're going to be phenomenal with their skill because they have good fundamentals. I meet and see a lot of players who are, maybe really good at not making mistakes, but then as everyone else around them is getting better, they're going to surpass them, because yes, they hit every ball into the court, but then they can't improve and be stronger and more skillful when they get older, because they were just really good at, 14-year-old volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
When we need players who are good at 18, 19, 20, college volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that, sometimes players get confused when they say, oh, well, I'm hitting this, statistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great, but we need you to peak in college. And to peak in college, you need to be really good with your fundamentals.
Yeah. And then say a player isn't playing and they're on the sidelines, what do you look for?
If someone's on the sidelines, we really look for them to be engaged, because it's very easy to kind of have a woe is me kind of, I'm not playing, so why do I care kind of attitude. And a lot of times, like I said, even though they may not be starting at, 14, 15, they could be down the road. So if they're at a young age understanding how to be a part of the team, even though they're not on the court at that time, that goes a long way, because that's part of being a good teammate overall.
Mm-hmm.
So personality and work ethic and, what is inside is just as important as how great they are, like, physically.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And now, when a player makes a mistake, what reaction from the player are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a good one, because a lot of times when players make mistakes, there's kind of two ways they go about it. Actually, three ways, really. One, they kind of go more inside themselves and look like they're about to cry.
Mm-hmm.
Two, they get angry at everybody else and say, it's not my fault, it's your fault. Like, you're, a bad setter, you're a bad teammate, and someone else. And the third is kind of more, they see it as a moment that wasn't their best, but then they can do something about it. And so that's kind of what we look for the best, is someone who is saying, I made that mistake, but it's not because I'm a bad volleyball player, and it's not because my teammates did anything. It's something that they can do and fix in the next play, which is one of the beauties of volleyball, is that, basketball and some other sports, the score keeps running, whereas volleyball, if you lose set 1, 25-0, it doesn't matter, because it's just now 1 set to 0.
Yeah.
Whereas the next 3 sets you can go and win, and nobody really knows or cares of that initial set score.
Yeah.
So being able to understand that, like, just because they had that mistake, regardless of how potentially embarrassing it may have been, there's another point coming, and you can be the hero, like, in the next point.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then, what interactions between a player and family member, or a player and teammate, you kind of answered, player and coach, are you looking for?
Yeah, definitely someone who understands, like, basic respect of your peers and your coaches. It's great when we have players who say they're very coachable, as well as we talk to coaches and parents too. So even though there may be someone who thinks they are, all that in a bag of chips, if they're not treating everyone around them the right way, we know that's a red flag, because then when they get to our program, they may be doing the same thing to us and to their teammates here. So really having, eye contact and being engaged, being active and wanting to be better is really important, because, again, as I said earlier, they need to understand that they're not ready, they're not peaking yet. Their peak should come in college, or maybe even after college. So the player who understands that and is hungry to learn will want to incorporate and learn from everyone around them, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And now when you get a recruiting video, what don't you want to see?
Yeah.
And what's your better, full games or like snippets?
Yeah. So when we get recording videos, we definitely don't want a full match, at least not right away. A lot of times you can tell when we look at film within the first 5 to 30 seconds whether or not we're interested in that player. Basic, movements, kind of like what I talked about before, fundamental movements. Are they physically fit? Are they of the right height for the position they're trying to be recruited for? The way that they are, generally moving between points, and potentially how they're communicating based on if there's like sound or not. When I watch videos, I turn the sound off. A lot of players, they put in really cool music. I don't hear any of the music.
Right.
I don't listen to any of that stuff, because a lot of times then, if you're watching it and they try to cue up really cool music that's in sync with their swing, that's like, oh wow, they seem more dynamic, they seem really like hitting the ball that hard. When you turn the music off, I find it's much easier to evaluate, because then there is no additional emphasis besides what their actual skill is doing.
Right.
So I feel bad, because there's some players who put a lot of effort into their sound, and I know other coaches who they will listen to the sound, but that's just my personal preference, because I watch a lot of videos. So I just turn the sound off completely, and like I said, within the first few seconds, I can kind of see what where they are, if it's like on one side of the fence that we're interested, or the other side we're not at all. The worst thing I see sometimes is that I'll have like DS Libero send video, and the first play is them diving for a ball, but it's like a free ball. So I'm like, no, if you're a great libero, you would just stay on your feet and make this really easy play. Instead, it's this like high, lofty free ball, and they're just diving in the most dramatic way, and I'm like, I don't want that on my team.
Right.
Yes, we want the dramatic dive when it's like a really difficult play and maybe off the block and something cool like that. But I think that's where some players, or maybe even their parents may not have played, or they don't know the full kind of level of the game, because as you go and progress higher and higher in the volleyball level, there's just a whole different sense of what is difficult and what is not. So some players may have thought, well, that was really a hard ball to get. It's like, well, no, at the college level, that's the easy ball. The hard one is when there's a no block and they're bouncing it straight down, and then you still dig it. Then it's like, that's what I want to see. So some of that is not even the player's fault. They just may not have seen top level volleyball. It's not like we have a professional league here, so they don't always have a top 25 college team down the road, or a way to see really good volleyball.
Okay. And then for email wise, how many do you get a week, and what makes an email stand out from others?
How many do I get a week? Sometimes it depends on the week. Definitely now that we're in like the recruiting season of club tournaments happening every so often, it's hard to quantify. I would say between like 50 to 100 per week. Again, it depends on kind of the recruiting season, sometimes by a year. Also, it will happen more often because when we are planning to go to certain tournaments, we'll purchase like a recruiting packet, and on that recruiting packet like sale, the vendor's website, they'll list which schools are sending or going to some tournaments. So a lot of times when I sign up for it, then all of a sudden I get a flood of emails because all the kids are going to be there, and they say, hey, I'm coming, I'm here, and everything else. When I get emails, again, a lot of the time I feel really bad because players will put this huge, long biography of themselves and their experience and everything else. But really, for me, when I'm clicking into an email, the first thing I look for is if they have a highlight video. That I'm going to that video and seeing and assessing, are they on the interest, are they on the side of the fence that I'm interested, or are they on the side of the fence where, we're going to move on and maybe come back later if they're still really young. But, it's just half the time it's like a very clear no with certain players. Then if I am interested, I'll go back and then read the email. And even then, I'll read maybe the opening paragraph. I'll look for what's their GPA, what's their height, what's their touch, and then from there kind of see if, is this now a next step going further in which we try to contact them if they're the right age, or maybe, a club coach, depending. It's tricky because now a lot of the recruiting rules are changing within the next few months, so we're going to be limited even more in who we can contact and respond to. But it's someone that's the right age that we can call back or email back, then that's when I'll respond to their email and say, hey, thank you for sending, like, your video was great, I really want to talk to you. And then at that point, I'll try to get a phone call with them and see what they're about, see if they're a good match for our program, or if maybe they're looking for something that we don't offer. You know, for example, Seton Hall does not have football. So the first thing they say, I want to go to the school with a good football team. Like, well, ours is undefeated, but they're not here, so we don't have one. So things like that there's a lot of details and kind of parts of what they are then looking for once we get past kind of, once we pass go of our interest for them.
And that's how an athlete would know if a coach is interested. You email, you call back.
Yeah. So if we're interested, we will find a way to get in touch with either that player or their coach. Again, depending on their legal year of if we're allowed to contact them or their coach. But definitely, as a recruiting coordinator, that's part of my job and my position as a first assistant to go through and skim through all these emails. So if there is someone who, once I get video, or if there is no video online, I'll try to see where they're playing next, go see them in person, or contact them then and say, hey, do you have video? Please send. But definitely, if we're interested, they will know, unless for some reason their email address is off, their phone is off, and they dropped off the planet, then we have no way to respond. I can't tell you how many times I've had also like voicemails, and the recruit would kind of say, hi, my name is, and then I can't understand their name. Then they don't leave a phone number. They don't say what club team they're on or how old they are or anything. And I'm just kind of like, oh, sweet kid, but I don't know who that was. And I can't follow up. So it's tricky because email is always a little easier because then clearly I can just read and reply, things like that. But we always ultimately want to talk on the phone because that's where you can't really hide behind, a typed email.
And so you get in contact with a kid, you go to see him play now during a game or a high school match. I've heard the tip of never ask your parent for a water bottle off on the sideline. I don't know if that's true. Like, take care of yourself with your own water bottle. Be responsible. Is there anything else like you just don't want to see?
That's funny because I mean, I never heard that, but it does make sense now I think about it. Like we do, obviously of all the seeing them on the court parts, we want you to play well, and ideally you're the best player or you're the go-to player and you're the team leader. But definitely kind of with the water bottle thing, like, I mean, I wouldn't mind if some kid was like, hey mom, can you get me a water bottle? But there's a big difference between someone who's like, hey mom, can you please grab me water? Or another kid who's
Mom,
like,
where's the water?
Mom, where's my Gatorade at? Which I've seen and been like, nope, so it's not so much kind of like tiptoe around and do this or don't do that. It's more just, be respectful, and hopefully that's just being yourself. But kind of we are watching, we're watching what you say and do to your teammates, say and do to your team, how you look after the match, before the match, what are you doing in warm-ups. I know so many players who, are in their warm-up with their partner to pepper, and then they, like, won't go for a ball, or they're not calling the ball, or they're, like, just kind of lazy. And then, because a lot of times with us coaches, when we have an attacker, for example, in the match, maybe they're not getting set a lot, especially, like, middle positions. So we want to see that in a warm-up, because then they get, like, 10 attacks in a row, and it's a little bit more efficient for us to see. And so when players go through their warm-up and they don't give maximum effort, it's going to be really hard for them to get noticed if, at that point where it's a perfect toss, perfect set, and they're not doing, an exceptional job. That would then hinder me from making the decision to come back during the match. If it's someone who said they're really interested in us and everything, then sure, I might make a second lap. But as far as my initial eval, if I go and I'm just looking to see new talent, right away, if in hitting lines, I'll watch a couple attacks. But if they're not kind of bringing in the effort that would be needed for the next level, I'm a little bit turned off. But that's not to say that I expect everyone to be perfect. I almost prefer someone who's making hitting errors, but it's aggressive hitting errors than like tipping every ball in. So no stress, but you don't have to be like worried about making mistakes, but just give your best, give your all, and that'll always go better.
Definitely.
For the kids.